You know, history is absolutely packed with wild stories. Tales so strange you'd swear they have to be made up. Well, today we're diving headfirst into one of the weirdest wars you'll ever hear about, a massive conflict sparked not over land or gold, but over a single severed human ear.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd, right? How could that possibly happen? But the answer is, believe it or not, a very shocking and complicated yes. And we're about to find out exactly how one man's ear was enough to plunge two massive empires into a bloody war.
Okay, so to really get the story of the ear, we first have to understand the world it came from. So let's jump back in time, all the way to the early 18th century. This was a period of intense and often really violent competition between empires.
Now, forget any idea you have of a Caribbean paradise. Back then, this whole region was a total powder keg. You had the British and Spanish empires just constantly at each other's throats, fighting for control of these incredibly valuable trade routes. The waters were just swarming with smugglers, pirates, and warships. Everyone was looking for a fight. And sailing right into the middle of all this chaos is our main guy, a British merchant captain named Robert Jenkins. He's really just out there trying to do his job, trying to make a living. But he is about to become an unwilling symbol for an entire nation's rage.
And here it is. This is the moment that lit the fuse. In 1731, Jenkins' ship gets boarded by the Spanish. Now, he's accused of smuggling, which was a super common charge back then, but the Spanish commander, a guy named Juan León Fendinho, decides he's going to make a particularly brutal example out of him.
And as he hands the severed ear back to Jenkins, Fendinho supposedly says this. Just think about that. It's a message of pure defiance, a direct insult not just to Captain Jenkins, but to the entire British crown. He was basically daring them to do something about it.
So how in the world did this incredibly brutal personal attack go from a simple sailor's story to a national reason to go to war? Well, what's really interesting is that it didn't happen right away.
7 years. That's right. For 7 long years, this whole incident was pretty much forgotten. Jenkins and his severed ear just faded into history. But behind the scenes, political tensions between Britain and Spain were just simmering, waiting for the right excuse to boil over.
And then you get this moment of pure political theater. In 1738, Robert Jenkins is brought before a committee in the British Parliament. And right there, in front of everyone, he pulls out the physical proof of what happened to him, his own shriveled, preserved ear, which he'd kept all this time. You can just imagine. The story of the ear was the spark that ignited everything. Newspapers went wild with it, the public was screaming for revenge, and politicians who wanted a war, pushed by merchants who were desperate to break Spain's trade monopoly in the Americas, suddenly had the perfect patriotic excuse. And by 1739, they got what they wanted. Britain officially declared war on Spain. So, war is on, and the whole of Britain is just swept up in this wave of patriotic anger. Everybody thinks this is going to be a quick, glorious little war to teach Spain a lesson. But, as we're about to see, the reality was much, much darker. In the beginning, things actually went great for the British. An admiral by the name of Edward Vernon became a massive national hero overnight. Why? Because he managed to capture the really valuable Spanish port of Portobello in what's now Panama. It was a huge early victory. And this victory just kicked off a nationwide party, basically. They called it Portobello Fever. Vernon was treated like a rock star. They were making songs about him, striking medals in his honor. Even London's famous Portobello Road was named after this triumph. The war felt like a massive success. But then, the war's fortunes just completely flipped. Riding high on that Portobello win, Britain launched one of the biggest amphibious assaults in its history against the fortress city of Cartagena in modern-day Colombia. This was supposed to be the knockout punch. Instead, it was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. This was the real cost of that invasion. Out of a huge force of nearly 30,000 men, tens of thousands of British lives were just gone. And what's so tragic is that most of them didn't even die in battle. They were killed by tropical diseases, horrible stuff like yellow fever and dysentery, in the swamps of the Caribbean. And in the end, the war that had started with such a bizarre, specific cause kind of lost its name and its purpose. It was just swallowed up by a much larger, continent-wide conflict called the War of the Austrian Succession. Suddenly, Britain and Spain were just two players in a much bigger geopolitical game. So what's the big takeaway here?
The War of Jenkins Ear is really this powerful, almost cautionary tale. It's a reminder of just how fragile peace can be, and how easily things like national honor, public anger, and political ambition can twist a single cruel act into a devastating war with an enormous human cost.
And that really leaves us with this final, very important question. It kind of forces us to look at our own world today and wonder, what are the modern-day Jenkins ears? What seemingly small insults or incidents are simmering out there right now, just waiting for the right political moment to explode? It seems history always has a lesson for us, if we're willing to listen.